Last Friday, the Vice President, Dr. Alhaji Mahamadu BAWUMIA, returned the nomination forms that was collected on his behalf by his supporters earlier in the week. He returned the forms to the leadership of the new Patriotic Party, signifying the formal beginning of his ambition to lead the new Patriotic Party. And wasn't this a grand occasion? The crowd, the numbers, the good politics of a bus ride instead of showing a fleet of Land Cruisers all combined to create the appearance of a new beginning. What is this new beginning? Well, BAWUMIA supporters say that it will be the first time that a non-Akan candidate of the MPP is showing a formidable candidature. He's already said to be leading in the polls, and Dr. BAWUMIA is thought of as the best campaigner among the lot. But how did the NPP get here? Well, whether by providence or by design, the NPP has always been led by an Akan candidate. Name them Dankwa, Buzia, Owusu, Oforiata, Edubuahin, Kofo, Akufo-Addo. So how come this happened? Well, the story would have been different if one of these three men had been more ambitious. This is the story about Kwame Nkrumah, Bafo Sakoto, and SD Dombo. The story is told on page 53 of the book K.A. Buzia, A Symbol of Democracy. Is written by Anania J and is forwarded by President J.A. Kufuor. Now the story begins with the actions of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah recorded in the first paragraph of page 53 of the book, and is as follows. In 1957, the government enacted a law called the Avoidance of Discrimination Act. The act, which came into effect on 31st December 1957, stated, among other things, an act to prohibit organizations using or engage in tribal, regional, racial, or religious propaganda to the detriment of any other community, or securing the election of persons on account of their tribal, regional, or religious affiliation and for other purposes connected therewith. The book continues. All political parties apart from the CPP would have been disbanded because of the majority of their parties were either regional based or had religious affinities. In September 1957, about 3 months before the commencement of the act, the smaller parties coalesced into a unified entity called the United Party, UP. That, according to Mr. C.K. Tedem, a founding member of the UP, was a safeguard of total collapse of multi-party democracy in Ghana. The opposition parties anticipated that Nkrumah intended to make Ghana a one-party state, which he did eventually, and entrench himself as life president. The parties that constituted the UP included the Aborigines Rights Protection Society, ARPS, the Anlon Youth Organization, AYO, the Gadangbe Shifimokwe, GASK, the Ghana Congress Party, GCP, the Muslim Association Party, MAP, the National Liberation Movement, NLM, the Northern People's Party, NPP, and the Togoland Congress, TCP. So at the end of the elections, all of these parties now knew how many members they had contributed to the United Party. It was clear and mathematically obvious that the Northern People's Party, led by SB Dombo and Mahamadu BAWUMIA, had won more seats among the smaller parties than any other group of people, including the NLM. To that extent, the leader of the minority in parliament was naturally to come from the Northern People's Party. But something else happened, recorded in the last paragraph of page 53 of the book, as follows. A remarkable feature about Buzia's appointment as leader of the UP in parliament was the trait of selflessness. that the leaders of the various opposition parties demonstrated in making BAWUMIA their new leader. Of the parties that merged, the Northern People's Party, the NPP, had the highest number of seats in the National Assembly, and their leader, Simon Diodong Dombo, could have remained leader of the minority in the assembly. Considering Dombo's previous position and the fact that his party was the minority party with the highest number of seats in parliament, he, Dombo, could have been the automatic leader of the new party. More so, he had the requisite qualities for holding office. However, he, Dombo, realized that BAWUMIA had extra attributes such as exposure and influence and clout, which would better serve the interest of the party and the country. Dombo, therefore, entrusted the leadership of the opposition to BAWUMIA. That act of Dombo has earned him a respectable position in the UP tradition now known as Dankwa Dombo BAWUMIA tradition, and the members talk passionately of Dombo's selflessness. So the matter seems settled in some people's minds. There was Dankwa, whose side of the party has been ably represented by Pa Willie and Nana Akufo-Addo. And then there was BAWUMIA, who was actually presented as an Ashanti candidate under the inspiration of the great Bafo Sakoto, who shares a paternal relationship of sorts with President J.A. Kufuor. In fact, Mr. Kufuor has often called BAWUMIA his political mentor. So, Kufuor represented the BAWUMIA part of the tradition. Now, they say that in spite of his selflessness, Dombo has not found a protege. So people think when some people say Edrumiso, it should have more to do with the Dombo part of the tradition than about anyone else. Well, all that may be emotional and cosmetic. So there is another group that advances the arguments for Dr. BAWUMIA. They have drawn their strength from data. They say that the geographic Ghana shows a clear distribution of votes since the beginning of the Fourth Republic. They said that for the MPP to win elections for the third time or break the eight, they, the MPP, will necessarily need to take portions of traditional NDC areas whilst they work hard to unite and keep their base. They make the point that compared to President Liman, Vice President and President Mahama, they believe that Dr. BAWUMIA has given the North a clear, competent turnout even with his role as Vice President. They also make the point that if the contest falls between Dr. BAWUMIA and President Mahama, many young people from the North across the country would want to secure a third presidency for the North by electing Dr. BAWUMIA. So there will be Dr. Liman, President Mahama, and Dr. BAWUMIA. On the other hand, if the young Northerners elect President Mahama, they would have had only two, Dr. Liman and President Mahama, which they actually already have. After all, the Ashantis have only J.A. Kufuor. Maybe we could add Achampong and Afrifa, but maybe not. The Evers have J.J. Rawlings. The Fantis have Professor J.E.A. Mills, and the Achims have Nana Addo Akufo-Addo. If the MPP gives the North the opportunity to have a third presidency, then BAWUMIA supporters say all the young Northerners will vote MPP all the way.
They know John Mahama cannot take me on in the North. I will beat him in the North. I will beat him in the North. They know it. They know the Zongos will change. Mahakamani. They know the Zongos will change. And even voter, we will get something from there. So, I know this is why they don't want me to be flag bearer. You the NDC, you want to select our flag bearer for us. How can you hear that?
But politics is not only about tribe. It's about competence, suitability, and marketability. So, in that regard, who is Dr. BAWUMIA? Dr. BAWUMIA was fathered by a politician named Mahamadu BAWUMIA.
We now have the arrival of the Chairman of the Council of States, Alhaji Mahamadu BAWUMIA.
He, Mumuni, together with SD Dombo, founded and led the Northern People's Party in early politics. Their fundamental interest was to secure development for the Northern Territories. They wanted the matters that concerned the North to be heard. They loved their people. Mahamadu BAWUMIA became a minister in the Second Parliament of the First Republic. In that regard, nature has played out an interesting scenario. If Dr. BAWUMIA becomes the MPP candidate for 2024, he will be contesting John Mahama directly as opponent for the first time. But many decades ago, their fathers, John Mahama's father and Dr. BAWUMIA's father, sat in the same cabinet here in Ghana in 1965.
The Second Parliament of the First Republic, August 24, 1965. Members of the Executive and Officers of Parliament. His Excellency Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, President and Commander-in-Chief. Honorable Kojobo Tio, Chairman, State Planning Commission. Honorable N.A. Welbeck, Minister of State for Party Propaganda. Honorable Imoro Igala, Minister for Industries. Honorable L.R. Abavana, Minister of the Interior. Honorable Kofi Bakun, Minister of Defense. Honorable E.K. Bensa, Minister of Works. Honorable A.J. Dowuna Hammond, Minister of Communications. Honorable E.N. Okansi, Minister of Parks and Gardens. Honorable E.A. Mahama, Minister of Animal Husbandry. Honorable Hans Kofi Boni, Minister of Food and Nutrition. Honorable Mahamadu BAWUMIA, Minister of Local Government. Honorable F.E. Techi Menson, Minister of Housing.
And say, that's so Musulmi, isn't that the case? They'll say, but if MPP selects Dr. BAWUMIA, campaign no, attention. They know the campaign is over. So they will be in trouble. They know we will break the gates.
Mahamadu BAWUMIA returned to active politics in the Fourth Republic as chairman of the Council of State, a position he held when JJ was president. Thus, Mahamadu BAWUMIA shared political space with the NDC, JJ Rawlings and Mrs. Rawlings. How do we interpret this? Supporters of Dr. BAWUMIA say given the senior BAWUMIA's huge image in the North, associated with his deep service to the CPP and the NDC, Dr. BAWUMIA is the best candidate to draw votes from the Nkrumahist and the NDC people who trusted his father's politics. And will there be people in the North who like Mahamadu BAWUMIA's politics? Oh yes, there will be many. But the story doesn't end there. A very basic assessment of parliamentary figures from the northern regions since 2008 will show that the MPP have moved from closing the gap on the NDC in the North to actually overtaking the NDC with the total number of seats from the three northern regions. Unbelievable, but here are the details. In election 2008, of 230 seats in parliament with 26 in the northern regions, the NDC won 21, whereas the MPP won only 4. That was the NDC winning the northern regions over the MPP by 80.7%. That was BAWUMIA's first time as running mate. Then in 2012, the seat had become 31 in the northern region as it is now. NDC got 20, MPP got 10, an independent candidate got 1. That was NDC winning by 64.5%. Then in 2016, when the MPP won a landslide victory, results were as follows. Out of 31 seats, NDC won 18, MPP won 13. That was NDC winning by 58.0%. Then comes the big one, 2020, and the MPP goes ahead of the NDC by gaining the lead in the 3 northern regions over the same 31 seats as follows. Northern region, NDC wins 9 seats, MPP wins 9 seats. Savannah region, NDC wins 4 seats, MPP win 3 seats. Northeast region, NDC win 2 seats, MPP win 4 seats. Altogether, now in the 3 northern regions, the New Patriotic Party is in a commanding lead. They have 16 seats and the NDC have 15 seats, coming from the NDC's lead of 80% in 2008. That means after 4 election cycles since Dr. BAWUMIA became vice president on the MPP ticket, he has drawn down the NDC's leadership of 80% in the north to now lead the NDC. This is phenomenal. Can one also say that in the same election cycle process, John Mahama has led the NDC to whittle down its 80% lead in the north to now be behind the MPP? Well, the jury is out on that one. Some may also say that there is no scientific correlation to the MPP success in the north and the work of Dr. BAWUMIA. Well, that may be true, but they must show how else the MPP has been able to beat the NDC in the north, especially in 2020's election, because in that election, the NPP were losing parliamentary seats all across the country, but in the north, they were gaining. In fact, it stands to reason that if the MPP had not done so well in the north in the 2020 elections, today the NDC may have had majority in parliament. So Dr. BAWUMIA's strength in turning around the north is obvious. They say that is why the NDC is afraid of him. But how did Dr. BAWUMIA gain so much credence in only 16 years in real politics? It was about this. Now, Dr. BAWUMIA is an economist and he had been with the central bank and he had become a politician. Between 2008 and 2012, he had introduced a kind of new narrative to the Ghanaian political discourse. And this was about heavy reliance on data. Dr. BAWUMIA had been doing a lot of political talk with data, and that was very new to the Ghanaian people. Historically, politicians do not rely a lot on data. They rely on personality, advocacy, etc., etc. But here was a great advocate, Dr. Mahamadu BAWUMIA, who had also introduced this data matter that a lot of the youth were jumping onto. So he had achieved sufficient believability among Ghanaians with his excessive reliance on data. When it was said that he was going to be the key witness for the petitioners, it raised the stakes of this case, and so the case was actually getting bigger. And this was the election petition. This event turned out to show BAWUMIA as famously competent, very articulate, a fighter for what he believes in, a respectful and very confident young man. By the time the petition was over, almost every young person in Ghana wanted their son to be like BAWUMIA. Indeed, Dr. BAWUMIA got the election petition right.
Let us put down my analysis and show me one repeated polling station in my analysis. If you are afraid of the truth, then of course you will hide behind these exhibit numbers. Dr. BAWUMIA, I'm sorry.
It's not a free fight. Just state your answer to it without Yeah, but my lord, with the greatest respect, I do not think we can treat this lightly.
After the election petition, it became obvious that Dr. Mahamadu BAWUMIA would be the key spokesperson for the MPP for the 2016 campaign. And whoa, did he not?
So, tell him I came to his hometown and he should answer the 170 questions. They have mismanaged this country and their incompetence and corruption has resulted in wahala for everybody. So I'm asking all of you to rise up and let's change this country together. We are going to transform this country and all of us are going to benefit, and the future is for the youth of this country. Thank you very much. God bless you. God bless you.
The campaign ended in victory and Dr. BAWUMIA was sworn in as the Vice President of the Republic. Currently, opponents of Dr. BAWUMIA have tried to mount a lot of political dirt on him. They have tried to say that Dr. BAWUMIA is responsible for the economic challenges that Ghana now faces. They have even called him a liar. But BAWUMIA supporters will respond sharply. They say that if one can take an economy at 3.4% growth from John Mahama in 2016, grow it in 17, 18 and 19 and 20 and grow it very well, then no one can complain after Dr. BAWUMIA after COVID and after Russia-Ukraine war. For in fact, they say that the figures of 17, 18 and 19 show that Dr. BAWUMIA's economics was working until COVID. Here is Ken Oforiatta presenting the concluding part of Budget 2019.
We have passed a fiscal responsibility to entrench fiscal discipline. We have reduced the fiscal deficit. We have established a fiscal council. We have issued a Eurobond with the largest tenor, issuance, least cost, the largest subscription. We have reduced the rate of debt accumulation. We have reduced the overall tax burden on Ghanaians. We have reduced benchmark values by 50%.
So, they say, BAWUMIA economics works once there is no COVID and major global issues. For indeed, Dr. BAWUMIA, they say, added nurses and teacher training allowance to the national budget. He added free SHS to the national budget and yet grew the 3.4 economy to 8% and maintained it until COVID. Well, Ghanaians will be the best judge on this matter. But doesn't the opposition believe that the current circumstances are global in nature?
I do think we must also look at the realities of the world situation, the global financial crisis and all that. Our economy is still fragile. This year, we have revised growth figures downwards because of the developments in the international markets. You know, China has slowed down, affecting the whole international financial market. Our world has become an increasingly complex one and unpredictable. Majority of economies around the world are sailing against strong headwinds. The world economic crisis and the slowdown in the growth of the Chinese economy has affected the growth of emerging markets and has resulted in a fall in world demand for commodities.
Well, if that was historical, this one is current.
A lot of the economic turmoil that we've just been talking about and that we're seeing around the world is, of course, as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. African countries have largely avoided taking sides on the issue. At the United Nations, Ghana, along with Kenya and Gabon, voted to condemn Russia, but then, of course, Ghana abstained on the vote to remove Russia from the UN Human Rights Council. In your view, were those the right decisions made by the current administration?
I think that it's a period of adversity for the whole world because it's triggering a kind of global recession as a result of the tensions that have been created. But at the same time, it must create some opportunities for Africa.
Oh yes, but when it's time for politics, it's time for politics.
For emphasis, the biggest blame for the current tragic situation in which we find ourselves lies with the very people charged with managing the country and not with the pandemic, not with any war in any country, as has been unprofessionally posited. And Ghana has been treated as an experimental playground or a family heirloom. And I regret to say this was all avoidable.
Now the internal MPP contest is here. Dr. BAWUMIA could win. At least he leads in the polls. To do so, he must win 2 contests clearly. First the superdelegates, and next the main contest, in which he must win an outright 50% plus 1, or else the contest will go into a second round. His supporters say that they are working for a united 70% of votes to further unite the party. Dr. BAWUMIA may have key party people supporting him, but what fascinates many of his supporters is the real political capabilities of his wife, Hajia Samira BAWUMIA. Do you remember this?
The youth of this country, we are saying to the NDC that we see you all right. You want us to see you? We see you, but we see incompetence. We see you, but we see corruption. We see you, but we see mismanagement. We see you, but we see bad governance. We see you, but we want change. We see you, but we want Ghana to move forward. That is why I have decided, and all the youth of this country, and all the well-meaning people of this country are saying, we need an incorruptible leader. We need a competent leader.
Well, if the MPP elects Dr. BAWUMIA, there sure will be more of Samira and the Samira vibe. Good luck to the Vice President and all the other candidates. May they remember to have a clean campaign. As someone said, John Mahama is the only opponent they have, and they must be wise about that. Until then, good luck.